Hello everybody, we are at the Warrior Project in Fayetteville, Tennessee. I'm Don Counts and we have Linda Williams here. And today, tell us who our guest is.
We have Virgil Clemmer, who is a member of our Friends of Fayetteville Lincoln County Veterans Inc. Board and a veteran. He was in the Navy. And Virgil, my first question to you is, I want to know what it was like to live on a submarine.
Well, I served from 64 to 85. And I had no intentions of going to the submarines, but I was at the Naval Air Facility in Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. And, excuse me, I was a yeoman, which is clerical. I was secretary, admin type, and they were looking for my specialty on submarines. So I volunteered and went to a diesel submarine out of Norfolk, Virginia called the Sarago, which was the last submarine commissioned at the end of World War II. So she was a World War II submarine. And that was a small boat. It was only test depth for 412 feet. And you had to decide, am I going to sleep on my back or my stomach when I get in? You had a foam mattress on a metal container, and you opened that up, and that's where your uniforms and all that stuff was. And it had what they called a flash cover over it. It was a vinyl cover, because right next to it was a sounding manifold, which might be sounding fresh water, how much was in the freshwater tank, or diesel fuel was in, how much diesel fuel was in that particular tank. But yeah, it was small. We had a forward torpedo room, after torpedo room, what they called a forward battery and after battery, which is where I slept. They had maneuvering, and where they ran the sticks to give you the power to move the things and move the propellers. We had a twin screw. And then you had maneuvering, and then the con up in the barrel where you did your attack for the submarines. But I loved it. It wasn't for everybody, but it was for me. And no, I didn't get claustrophobic. We did when I was out of Norfolk. That submarine was out of Norfolk, Virginia, and we did a 4-month. We were under the water for 4 months doing what they called a spec op, special operations. And you could go up and have periscope liberty if you wanted. But I said, when we get to port, let me know. I'll go up and look and see where we're at. But no, and it was, diesel submarines were interesting. You smelled diesel fuel. I mean, when I was in Norfolk, I lived in a 3rd-story apartment, and I'd come in and go up the back stairs and take everything off and leave my stuff on the landing and go in, and then my wife would hang it on the line and let it air out. But your hair, it held the molecules of the diesel forever and a day, so you always smelled like a submarine. But
So when you were down under for 4 months, you never came to the top?
well, we did one time. It was an unscheduled surface. We were snorkeling, and that's 60 foot underneath the water, because you put up a snorkel pipe, and what that did is you ran your engines that brought fresh air in so you could charge your batteries, but you were still underneath the water. And you had 3 electrodes on it, and when they flooded, then it closed that flapper, and then the vacuum shut down the engine and also pulled a vacuum on your ears. But we were doing that one morning, and it was a Saturday morning, about 11 o'clock in the morning, and we lost DC first power, which told the plainsman where his planes were. And then when he's fiddling around trying to find out where his planes are, because they can't see the bubble now. And then they lost AC trying to get DC back on the line, which ran the hydraulic pipes. And so we took a deep dive. We took it about 200 foot below test depth, but we surfaced and just went up just because we were someplace we weren't supposed to be. And we crushed the snorkel pipe and blew all the other tanks so we could get positive buoyancy, and then we immediately went back down. Yeah, but yeah.
And that didn't bother you being 4 months under the water?
No.
How many people were on your ship?
Well, when you make a special op, you bring on special people that are called spooks, the CTs, and they listen to the sounds of the planes, people making noise up there, and listen to the ships. We take pictures of the undercarriages or the keel of ships and their screws, and Well, you're playing spy. That's what you're doing. It's a special op, But it was interesting. And then my job was to type all the patrol reports and do all the administrative stuff on the submarine.
Did you spend most of your 21 years?
In the submarine community, I was either on submarines or I served with the Airedales first for 2 years, and I didn't like that, and I terminated, and they came out with the all-nav wanting submariners, so I went there.
Now, wait a minute. What did you call that?
The Airedales, the Air Navy, at Andrews Air Force Base, Naval Air Facility there, for the pilots that are in the Bureau and the Pentagon, they need to keep their proficiency. So they'd come out to Andrews Air Force Base and fly once a month or whatever their requirement was. So I left there, and then I went to the Sarago, and I left there, and I went to Nuclear Power School in Idaho Falls, Idaho. That's where we trained them to operate the nuclear submarines and the surface ships. And then I left there and went to the Bonefish, which was the last diesel submarine we made, and it was in Pearl Harbor. And then I was fortunate enough to make warrant off of that, and I left there and went to submarine tender in Bremerton, Washington, took it to Scotland, and then left Scotland to a submarine tender in San Diego, and then back to Hawaii to a submarine squadron. And then I rode the submarines once a month. I'd go out and inspect submarines, and then I left there and went to New York, to Nuclear Power School in New York, and I retired from there. It was a great career. I loved it.
Let's talk about where you grew up and then what led you into the military.
I grew up in a little town called Point Marion, Pennsylvania, and it's smaller than Fayetteville. We didn't even have a stoplight, still don't. It was a coal mining town and had a glass factory, and that was about it. And I always wanted to go into the military. I always wanted to go into the Navy. But after I got out of high school, I went off to business college and then went to Ohio and worked for a while. And then Uncle Sam said, I want to see you. And so I went to the Navy recruiter with this little letter that said, how would you like to go to Fort Benning, Georgia on the 18th of August, if I remember right? And I said, if you let me in, I'm going to make a career out of it. I said, I already have my career planned. I wanted to go in. I wanted to make chief and make warrant, make LDO, and retire with 30 years. And he called the draft board and asked me, he got off the phone. He said, what are you doing today? And I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, go get a physical. He gave me a bus ticket, and I went off and got a physical, and I came back, and I said, now what do you want me to do? And he said, when do you want to go? That was on a Wednesday. I said, how about Monday morning? That sounds good. I went home. My mother said, I expected you to be in Great Lakes. And I said, no, that's not till Monday. So yeah, it was something I really want. Now, submarines, I hadn't planned on that, but it was just something. And honestly, I doubt that I would have stayed in because I get seasick on the surface. Put me under the water. Yeah, I did. When on the diesel boats, you transited on the surface. And so when you went to the op area, after you got out of the breakwaters in Norfolk, we dove. And the first little experience, the first time I went aboard Friday morning, we got underway Monday. And so I'm a non-qual, because you had to qualify in submarines. I'm a non-qual, and we're underway, and I said, oh man, I'm getting queasy. They said, we'll go back to the after battery or the after torpedo room actually, and find a bunk. So I'm back there, crawled in the bunk. We steamed out. I heard ooga ooga, dive. And I said, all right, because I hadn't eaten all day, so I run up to the mess decks, and I'm standing at the mess decks making a peanut butter sandwich and peanut butter and jelly, and I hear ooga ooga. I said, what? We just dove. He said, oh no, that's emergency surface. We're flooding in the after engine room. So that was my indoctrination to the submarines. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. When you find out that you're going to be in a submarine, do they do any kind of pre-training for the?
I had to go down to the diving school in Anacostia. There in D.C. and Maryland, West Virginia, or Virginia, whatever it is. And I had to go into a tank, and they take it down to 55 PSI. and to see if you can handle the pressure. And there were about 18 of us in there, myself and a first-class gunner's mate, I remember. And the rest of them were midshipmen out of the Naval Academy. And only about 3 of the midshipmen, they'd take it down and they'd start bleeding from the ears or screaming and hollering, and they'd take them out. But yeah, that was it. Now, normally you had to go to sub school, but since they were hunting for me, cooks and radiomen, they took us direct input. And so that was, luckily I didn't have to go to psychological interview either. I know you'd think I'd fail.
Could you see out while you were there?
In the what?
In the water? Could you see out in the water?
If you went and looked at the periscope, you
That's
know,
all there was.
that's all there was. Yeah, and my job on a spec op was, on special operations, was normally a 12-hour day. It was, except for Sunday. I was also the Protestant lay leader, so I had church services on Sunday, so that was my, 16-hour day. And then I had to work on quals because I was a non-qual at that time. And so you had to go and learn the systems, get all the chief's signatures, and then make a walk through the boat. And I was a terrible qualified submarine sailor. I'll be the first to admit it.
So if you're under water for 4 months, you had to have had to be a pretty large submarine. Explain how big it is, because you got to have food for 4 months too.
It was not a large submarine, 412 feet if I remember right.
How many people?
And normally we ran with about 68 people. But when you did the spec op, then you had about another 15, depending, 20 people. So, and as far as food, you better learn how to walk hunched over, because the passageway was stacked with canned goods. And so the longer you was out, the more headroom you had.
Right.
We had a chief engineman that wore a hard hat all the time when we was on there. But, and as far as fresh stuff, after about 2 weeks, you had no fresh vegetables, condensed milk, powdered milk, we also had on that op, we also had one of the stills. We had 2 stills on board making fresh water. And of course, the diesel engines, we had Fairbanks Morse diesel engines, and they were water lubricated, fresh water. So used a lot of water for that. So they made, when one of the stills went down, then they just made 1 pot of coffee for each meal, and that was it. And no showers. We had showers on board, but we didn't have any fresh water to take a shower. If you wanted to wash off, you could use some torpedo alcohol, and if you had any abrasions or cuts, hang it up. Or if you wanted to do salt water, you could do that. But then you crawl in your rack, and you got all those salt granulars, so it's best. Everybody smelled wonderful.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
How deep were you? You had any idea?
Well, it was a 400-foot boat, and we took it on the deep dive. We took it over 600 feet. But one time that boat was interesting. One time we had a fire going into Mayport, Florida. One time, you don't want to fire on a submarine. Another time we were doing springboard, which is an op in the Caribbean every summer, and you're working with aircraft carriers and destroyers and other ships. And we hit an uncharted pinnacle. We was making approach on an aircraft carrier, and we hit an uncharted pinnacle at 250 feet, I believe it was, somewhere around.
What is that?
It's a mountain down there that you didn't know was there. It's an underwater mountain, yeah. And so then when we hit that thing, then the boat just ricocheted to the surface. And we were, what they say, a UQC, underwater telephone. So the officer said, clear the area because we've come up about 100 yards from a destroyer. So, yeah. So now if you look at that particular area in the Caribbean, you'll see a sign on your charts that says Sarago's Pinnacle. They sent an oceanographic ship down and they charted it. So
y'all discovered a mountain?
yeah, we discovered. There's a lot of stuff out there that we think, that people think it's there, but they don't know what's out there till you hit it.
Okay, I know the up periscope, down periscope thing, you put it up to see above the water, right?
You had 2 periscopes. You had an approach scope, and then you had an attack scope. You had number 1, which was an approach scope, and it was shorter. Then you had the attack scope, which mean that you took it down a little deeper, so that you could get down further into the water. Not that much further, but it's, you know.
Okay.
And you could take pictures through it, you know.
But as far as like seeing the fish and the
Well, you had to be underwater to do that, yeah. But they
Okay,
could do
but you
that too.
could.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Because on those, they take salinity readings and all that stuff to, you know, it's a lot way over my head. I mean, you know, I typed the report and we'd come back from that, and some of the spooks, some of the CTs had broke their typewriter, and I typed some of their reports, and we were coming into Norfolk after the op, and I went into the wardroom where the officers' quarters, and they ate and everything, and you can't be in here. All these, I typed all those reports. I don't know what I typed. I just did what I was told. Yeah.
What did they do with the reports that you typed?
They, when we didn't go into the harbor with them, they sent out a small boat. All the intelligence people came out, and they were in big canvas bags, and they took them off before we even got to port. So and took them up to Subland, because we were in the Atlantic then. Yeah. And what they went from there, I don't know.
You know, I never thought about it, but I guess the submarine would be a spy ship.
Yeah. And we had a couple. We had the halibut, I believe, was one. I was never on it, but it was a fast attack, and it was designed strictly for that. That's all they did was play, you know. Now, when I was on the bonefish out of Pearl, we left Pearl and was supposed to go into the Indian Ocean to pick up down pilots. But being a diesel boat, the powers that be didn't want a diesel boat in the Indian Ocean. So we went and did a spec op in other places, and that was interesting. When we were there, we lost a hydraulic accumulator, which operates your planes and all that stuff. So when we were in water that if somebody flew over and was looking for us, they would have seen our shadow. So it took us, I think it was 4 days to get out of there. And I, being a non-watch stander, I went back to the after room and operated. I had a set of headphones, and they'd tell me 5 degrees right rudder, and I'd pump this pump and go 5 degrees right rudder, or operate the stern planes or whatever. It took us to get back to Yokosuka, and then they had sent over a specialist to work on it.
So you would have like doctors, nurses?
No. We had a corpsman on board. Old Doc King, he just passed away about 6 weeks ago.
So what would happen if somebody had an attack of appendicitis or?
Well, if we were in the middle of an op, they'd put him up on the table, wardroom table, and that's where they'd operate him. When I made the North Atlantic run, my wife was pregnant, and I had to sign a paper that if something happened, I couldn't come back. And the XO's wife was heavy with child too, so he had to sign it too. I never said anything to my wife about it until years later. We were at a party.
I probably wouldn't have either.
And Nadine, which was his wife, said something to mine, and yeah, a little flack went there. But hey, and that's a terrible thing to say. I mean, I was in the Navy before I married her, you know. But yeah, now if somebody, say, passed away and you were on a spec op, they'd probably put them in the freeze box until they got back, in the chill box.
Somebody passed away on the ship.
Yeah. 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 It was different.
So how long did you do this? How long did you stay in the Navy?
21 years. 21 years. I wanted to do at least 27, but my wife at that time got cancer and was terminal, so I retired. I was a W4. Navy doesn't make W5s, so I came home. It was a good life. It was. I enjoyed it. Met a lot of great people.
Sorry, go ahead.
But would I do it again with the modern Navy? I doubt it. I doubt it. There's too much politics involved in it. Yeah. The diesel, it was right for me because the diesel community was just a small community. I served with people on both coasts that we were might be in a different submarine, but on the same coast, see them again. We have a reunion. In fact, next May I'll be at a reunion in North Little Rock with the guys from the Sarago and other smoke boats. We call them smoke boats because they diesel engine smoke.
What do y'all do at these reunions?
Tell a bunch of sea stories, and they also have competitions. Like we'll be at this at the smoke boat reunion in North Little Rock, and they'll run a bunch of competitions because all the Navy ships and submarines, they have battlees and awards for that you fly, and so we'll have these competitions to see what submarine takes the flag back to the next reunion. So it's a lot of fun.
So your whole 21 years you was working in submarines?
All but 2 years I was either in submarines or submarine community. Yeah, I was supposed to stay at Andrews for 4 years, but I never liked shore duty. My sea time out of my 21 years, and some of it was on tenders and some of it on squadron, but I went to sea all the time. It was 16 years of sea time out of 21. And yeah.
I guess you got to meet a lot of interesting people.
Oh, definitely. I served with some fantastic people that two of them that I served personally with, they retired 3 stars and they were submarines commanders. I served with them when they were submarine commanders, and just fantastic people. And be surprised that the Navy has the college in Monterey for the officers, and one officer I served with, the Navy sent him to MIT. He had a couple degrees from there, but very personable. The diesel boat people, that's like they talk about Admiral Kelso. Well, he qualified on diesel submarines before he went nuke, and I think that created a different type of person, more personable people. The nukes were a breed of their own. Yeah, but it was great. It was I served with some people, and there's some stories that it's just. Well, like I said, this corpsman buddy of mine called me about a month ago and said, I have stage 4 cancer, Virg, and he says I won't be around here too long, and he died 2 weeks later. But that's the camaraderie that you make. Yeah. I went over to his house one day to play tennis when I was on the tender in San Diego. I left 3 days later. Just that kind of friendship. You can talk about your high school friendships, but a military friendship is completely different. It is.
What brought you to Fayetteville, Tennessee?
Well, my standard answer is I'd meet nice people like you.
We hear that a lot, don't we?
Yeah, no.
But I wanted a small town, and I wanted Pennsylvania. First of all, is taxed. I mean, they tax you for everything, and I was going to be close to a military base, and my thing was if I had 4 seasons. If it snowed a little bit, that was a plus, but I wanted to see the leaves change. Hey, I lived in Hawaii for 8 years, and I got sick and tired of seeing the sun come up.
This is hard.
Really?
I left there. I left Hawaii, and they said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "Any place in the Northeast where it changed." I went to upstate New York. We had 75 inches of snow every year. Yeah, and I loved it. Yeah.
So how did you pick Fayetteville?
Well, first of all, we was going to go to McMinnville, but Joyce, my wife, has asthma, and that up there did not agree with her with the nurseries. And then we came down here, and it was a nice little town, so, and it was closer. I mean, we was thinking about McMinnville and the Air Force Base, but they have nothing for retired people. So this was it. And then, we bought the place. In fact, that's another story, but we were on our way to a submarine reunion when I bought the place. And so when we came back and we'd finally settled, we bought it in June 9 years ago, and then you guys were organizing this and had that article in the paper, and I called the number and said, hey, I'm new in the area, I can help. And
he and his wife Joyce have been wonderful with this exhibit. They both serve on our board, and I have to straighten Virg out every now and then.
Good.
she's tried for 34 years and she's still working at it. But no, it was a way to serve my comrades and to get to know the people and to get to understand the town. And like I say, we've met some fantastic people here, and we enjoy Fayetteville, and they're stuck with us.
What was funny, when he first came, it was just him. Joyce did not come. And I forget now what it was that we said. And
Needed a
Virg was-
computer.
Needed compute, yes, we needed computers, and Virg says, I think I need to bring my wife.
Yeah, I said, I don't understand them, but I know somebody that does. So I conned her into it, and she's enjoyed. And she's a substitute school teacher, and she just, we like it here. We enjoy it.
You have a career after the military? No?
I had don't put this on. I had an upholstery business for 26 years. And so I did that in PA, and then we shut the business down. And I do it here on the side. I tell people, you catch me at home, and I'm willing to help you.
And he does beautiful work too, I might add.
Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn. Some days a diamond, some days a gold, but I enjoy it. I picked it up in Hawaii, and they had a hobby shop there, and I did that when I wasn't at sea. Yeah, it's fun.
Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Virgil Clemmer, thank you very much. Navy veteran, we appreciate you talking to us.
Thank you, sir, ma'am.
You.